Long ago in Asia, Buddhist monks made a choice. They said no to having their own money and things. They chose to live simple lives. They wanted to focus on prayer and learning. They said they did not want greed or wealth. But something strange happened over time. The temples where these monks lived became very rich and very powerful. They held money. They lent money. They stored gold and goods. They even acted like banks. This happened without the monks wanting it. They just wanted to help people and be trusted. This story shows us how trust can build power. Buddhism came to China around the year 100 CE. At first, not many people knew about Buddhism. It came from other lands far away, but it grew very fast. The rulers and rich people in China liked Buddhism. They thought if they gave money and land to temples, the monks would pray for them. They believed the monks' prayers would help them do well. So rich people and rulers gave and gave. They gave land and gold and silver. The temples kept getting more and more wealth. It happened because people trusted the monks. The monks seemed good and honest. People wanted the monks to help them through prayer. By the Tang dynasty, which went from 618 to 907 CE, the temples had become very important to the economy. In the big city called Chang'an and other places, temples owned huge farms. These farms were really big. They had thousands of workers. Some families even sent their sons to become monks to avoid paying taxes to the government. They could give the land to the temple instead of to the ruler, so temples got more and more land this way. The government also gave land to temples because they thought it was good to help Buddhism. The most important thing was this: the temples did not have to pay taxes. Normal people who owned land had to give money to the government every year. But temples did not, so temples kept all the money from their farms. This made them very rich very fast. The monks did not just own the land. They ran the farms like real businesses. They grew crops like wheat and rice. They raised animals. They made medicine and handicrafts. Some temples even ran mills where they pressed seeds to make oil. The temples built big warehouses to store food and goods. They kept rice safe in huge warehouses. They kept gold and silver locked away. Here is why this mattered so much. People in those days did not trust kings because kings could be mean. They did not trust regular merchants because merchants might steal or cheat. But they trusted monks. Why? Because monks had made promises. They said they would not lie. They said they would not steal. They said they would not hurt people. The monks seemed to keep these promises. Also, temples did not go to war. Temples did not get knocked over by bad rulers. Temples stayed the same year after year. They were stable. This made people feel safe, so people came to temples with problems. A merchant needed to travel to another city. He did not want to carry gold with him because he might get robbed and killed. So he went to the temple. He gave his gold to the monks. He said, "Keep this safe for me." The monks said yes. They locked the gold away. When the merchant came back, the gold was still there. The temple had kept the promise. A farmer had a bad year. His crops did not grow well. He did not have seeds to plant next year. He went to the temple. The monks had stored grain in their big warehouses. They gave him seeds. They said, "You can pay us back after you harvest your crop." This was a loan. The farmer got help and the temple got a little money back later. The temples did these things over and over. They started keeping money that other people gave them. They lent out grain and seeds and money. Sometimes they charged interest. Interest means the person had to pay back more than they got. If a farmer got 10 bags of grain, maybe he had to pay back 11 bags. The extra one was the interest. Sometimes the monks gave loans to poor people with no interest because they wanted to help. Some of these loans were like what we call pawn loans today. A person would bring something valuable. The monks would give them money. If they did not pay back the money, the monks kept the thing. By the middle of the Tang dynasty, the temples had become incredibly powerful. In some areas, temples owned almost half of all the good farmland. They had thousands of workers and slaves. When people were hungry, temples released stored grain. This stopped the price of grain from going up to high. When price goes up to high, poor people cannot buy food. The temples were like a government managing the money supply. They acted like what we now call central banks. Central banks are banks that control money for a whole country. But this huge wealth of the temples created a big problem. The rulers saw temples and thought of them as enemies. The government needed money for wars and rebuilding cities. The government saw all the gold and land the temples had. The rulers became angry that temples paid no taxes. In the year 845 CE, an emperor named Wuzong decided to take action. He did not like Buddhism anyway because he followed a different religion. But the real reason was money. He ordered almost all the monasteries closed. He ordered soldiers to destroy temples. Over 4,600 big temples were torn down. 40,000 smaller temples were torn down too. About 260,000 monks and nuns were forced to leave. They had to become regular people again. Now they had to pay taxes like everyone else. The government took all the temple lands. They took the gold and silver and copper. They melted them down and made coins. The government suddenly became very rich. The temples lost almost all their power. This was very hard on Buddhism in China. Many temples never came back. Many teachings were lost. But people still needed trusted places to keep money safe. People still needed loans. These needs did not go away. After this bad time, Buddhism continued but was not as powerful in China. But the story did not end. The ideas about temples and money moved to other countries. Japan became very important next. In Japan, from about the year 800 to 1600, Buddhist temples became powerful again like they had been in China. Two temples became especially strong. One was called Enryaku-ji on a mountain called Mount Hiei. The other was Kofuku-ji in a city called Nara. These temples had lots of land, workers, money and gold. In Japan, something was different from China. Rice was like money. When people talked about how rich someone was, they measured it in rice. A measure of rice was called a koku. The temples knew this. They built huge warehouses and filled them with rice. When farmers needed seeds to plant, temples gave them seeds from stored rice. When people were hungry, temples sold them rice at fair prices. When there was a bad harvest, temples could release stored rice to the market. This stopped the price of rice from jumping up too high. The temples managed the rice and prevented people from starving. This was exactly like what modern central banks do today. The temples in Japan gave loans like the temples in China had. A person who wanted to build a house could borrow from the temple. A merchant who wanted to buy goods could borrow. A farmer who needed money could borrow. The temples charged interest on these loans. Sometimes they asked for land or goods as security. This meant if someone did not pay back the loan, the temple could take their land. If someone refused to pay, the temple could go to court and force them to pay. The temples also took gifts of money from rich people. These were called endowments. The money kept earning money over time. The temples used this money for loans. The powerful temples in Japan created armies. They trained monks to fight. These fighting monks were called sohei. They carried weapons like swords and spears. By the 1100s, big temples like Enryaku-ji had huge power in the city of Kyoto, the capital city. The temples could block the roads. They could protest against the government. They used these powers to get what they wanted. If the government tried to take their land or tax them, the temples would block roads or threaten violence. The government usually gave in, but this did not last forever. He wanted to break their power over land and money. Other leaders did similar things. They burned temples and took temple lands. In Korea, rulers also worried about temple power. Many rulers followed a religion called Confucianism. These rulers did not want temples to be too rich and powerful. They created laws that limited how much land temples could own. They created laws that limited how much money temples could have. This stopped temples from becoming as powerful as they had been in China and Japan. Over time, governments everywhere learned something important. If too much wealth goes to temples or any religious group, that group becomes as powerful as the government. If people lost trust in a bank, everybody would go get their money at once. The bank would fail. Banks work because of trust. Central banks are even more important. They hold money for the whole country. They control interest rates. They try to keep the economy healthy. Buddhist temples did exactly these things. They held grain like a central bank holds money. They controlled grain supply like a central bank controls money supply. They kept the economy stable. Today, in modern cities like Hong Kong and Singapore, lots of money flows into banks. Why? Because people trust these banks and cities. The rules are fair, the government is stable, people feel safe. It is exactly like in ancient times. Money flows to safe, reliable, trusted places. The monks who started all this did not want to be rich or powerful. They just wanted to help people and be honest. But by being honest and keeping promises, they built something bigger. They built systems that worked so well that people trusted them completely. This trust became the most valuable thing. With trust, they could hold deposits. With trust, they could give loans. With trust, they could manage an economy. With trust, they could last for centuries. The story of Buddhist temples is really a story about what happens when you build something on trust and honesty. Real power comes not from force or tricks. Real power comes from being reliable. It comes from keeping promises. When you keep promises, people trust you. When people trust you, they give you their money. When people give you their money, you have power. But you only keep that power as long as you stay honest and reliable. The monks taught us that real strength comes from being trusted. Real wealth comes from helping others. Real power comes from keeping promises. When you focus on these things, money and power come naturally. The temples grew rich and powerful not because the monks wanted money and power. They grew rich because the monks wanted to be honest and helpful. This is the greatest lesson from this history. Money is not evil. Banks are not evil. Economic systems are not evil. They are only evil when they are built on dishonesty. When they are built on trust and helping people, they are good. They help everyone. The Buddhist temples showed us this. They built one of the first banking systems in the world. They did it without wanting to. They did it by focusing on trust, honesty, and helping others. This is why their story still matters today.